And boom, just like that. Boom. We are live, everybody. We are live. Welcome, everybody, to Red TV in Conversation. Red TV, I'm Peter Clark, and super pumped that you're here today. Super pumped that you are joining us here today. You, right there. If you've watched us before, thank you for watching. If you're brand new, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. We are live right now. We're on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Twitch and LinkedIn and any other thing, littlething.com that the kids are using today. That is what we're doing as we speak right now. This is going to be a different show, everybody. This is going to be a different show today. And just for a couple of reasons, mostly because I know this gentleman fairly well. And we've spoken multiple times about this subject matter. And I just think to have someone of his expertise on board today, I really want to dig into literally what he does, as opposed to sometimes we dig into who people are, which we do both around here. That's what we do. We dig into both around here. But we're definitely going to dig into a little bit about this company, Nubix, and all about applications. Because if you're a content creator, if you're a person who basically has a product or service, you could be an online trainer, you could be sales trainer, online courses, video, audio, content creator, anything like that. Apps. Everyone wants their own app, and there's a complexity to that whole subject matter that is sometimes overwhelming to most people. So we're going to try to debunk a little bit of that, and we're going to try to bring some answers. If you have any questions, please, if you're watching live, put some questions here about applications, the idea of building your own app, creating your own app, that process itself. If you have a question about that, definitely want you to bring that to the table today. But in the meantime, let's introduce our guest today. Very super special guest, CEO of Nubix Inc. in Calgary, Alberta. An app developer. I use that term just to simplify what this gentleman does and what he has done in the past, but he is definitely a creative disruptor. So I think that's the best way to describe. So please welcome George Curnew. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Peter.
Good to see you, man.
I'm great. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Nice to see you set up in your little home office there, and everything's looking rock and roll. It's cool, man. Good to see you. I appreciate you joining us today. It is Monday, but in Canada, everybody, it's a long weekend here in Canada. So today is a holiday, and we still put George to work today. So, George, before we start anything, always ask, health-wise, it's been a crazy 12 months. Everything okay? You and your family? Everything good?
Everything's good. The only person I know that got COVID was my son, and he did that early on by acting unbelievably irresponsibly. So, but other than that, no one else has gotten ill or no other issues. So,
kids.
Yeah.
That's okay, man. That's what happens. I mean, someone's got it. I think I've met one or two people that have had it and so on. And in it, like you said, it's different. Again, some people can be a little more careless with it and pick it up. Some people super careful about it and still. So but you've been healthy and your family is generally healthy, so that's fantastic. That's the most important thing. I want to make sure everyone connects with you. You don't spend a whole bunch of time on LinkedIn, George, do you? I mean, I know you're on LinkedIn, but I know we're broadcasting out to LinkedIn right now, and we're going to be talking about apps and applications and so on. So I'm thinking business people connect with you here on LinkedIn and so on. So this is where you can find George. I think probably the best place to find you, George, is basically through your website, right? Nubix.ca.
Yeah, I use LinkedIn to connect with people. I don't post very much. Okay. It's gone kind of the way of Facebook in the last couple of years. It was a way more powerful tool for business people. Yeah. Before people started posting things that belong on Facebook, not on LinkedIn. Yeah. But you can reach me there, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm there every day. So
that's an interesting comment right there, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think you know, in the viewpoint of what LinkedIn has been trying to do is obviously drive video content and so on, and competing with Facebook and YouTube and these kinds of things. So thus the ability to also broadcast live and so on. So you're right. I think people have been moving away from the traditional business sort of centric content, and they've been sharing a lot of different things. So to your point, it's turned more like Facebook for you. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Hey, I just want to make sure there's a couple of people here that are tuning in to watch. Looking forward to this. Thank you for the user right there. Ashwani, I haven't not seen that gentleman in a long time. Appreciate the new looks and new red format. Hey, glad you're here, man. Glad to hear. Because I think Ashwani, if I'm not mistaken, George, he's in India as we speak, which means I don't know what time of the day is over there. So it's probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning over there right now. So anyway, if that's the case, we appreciate that and all that kind of stuff. And hey, Groovy, love to hear you. Listen, right back at you, LinkedIn user. So put in brackets. Sometimes it doesn't show us exactly who's watching right now. So appreciate that. So George, you know, we're going to jump right into this about applications. And the reason why we've talked about this in the past before is because I'm super interested in having my own platform, the ability to broadcast live, to house, if you will, a library of content, to be able to have it in one particular place, steer people right there, and literally in their hands, being a mobile app or something that you could push up to other like whether the big screen experience or an iPad or something like a tablet, but still having it in people's hands, a place like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about apps in general, and then a little bit about more specifically with what you do. But let's talk about Nubix, the company Nubix, Nubix.ca. Tell us just a little bit about Cole's Notes. What exactly do you guys do at Nubix, right? What kind of services would you offer if people were to reach out to you and connect with you?
So we've been building web applications, which are distinct from websites for probably better part of a decade. That's been our primary focus. We actually, though, are what we were described as by a client one time as a digital Swiss Army knife. So we have the capability and the interest to develop all kinds of different styles of applications. So we do websites, we do complex web apps. We do mobile application development, both Android and iOS. We've done a pretty significant amount of TV app development, which is a kind of a separate environment. We do Apple TV apps and Android TV apps. We do enterprise application as well. So really not particularly interesting from a user interface point of view, but aggregating all kinds of, you know, really rich data, Internet of Things data, plant data and whatnot, and pull it up into an app. And it's used by corporations, primarily to push information to selected user groups inside the organization. So we're all over the map in terms of the kinds of applications that we're creating. So we're relatively unique, I think, in really having kind of an insight into what tools work best for what kind of a situation, for what kind of a target audience. And there is no single answer. There's no single way to develop an app. There's no single way to, or a single place to host it, for example. You have to go through and do basically a use case and figure out who you're trying to reach, what are the objectives, you know, what are your budgets, what's your long-term strategy, and is a short-term strategy different from your long-term strategy in terms of how you develop the app, what platform you put it on, what tools you use to develop it. So we typically have probably a dozen or so applications under development at any one time. Some relatively simple, some quite complex. And we use, like, our toolkit is pretty varied. So, you know, we had talked a little bit in our last discussion that the app development market is really, really complicated, and it gets more complicated year by year. But more than that, it's confusing. It's confusing to people because they hear all of this terminology and these platforms, and everybody who's developing with one specific tool or delivering solutions on one platform tout that platform and their tool set as the best. We don't take that approach. We have the view that, you know, that there are all kinds of different tools, and you need to really pick the right tool for the right task and the right audience. So.
Yeah, no, listen, thank you for you just covered so much right there. Any one of these things we could unpack into a separate show. And it's so true. I think the message there is that there's so many different solutions and options for people in general or businesses in general, whether you're using it to be a direct interface with customers, for example, or if it's used internally, if it's used with your partners and maybe some of your suppliers, these kinds of, again, it depends on the vertical of the business, the industry, the intention, if we will, the intention of what we're trying to do with that. Let me jump to Nubix. One thing that you do say on your website, and I'm going to bring up your website just so people can see while you answer this for me, but you talk about creating a 360-degree experience. Can you just touch on that a little bit? Because you talked about, developing like television applications so that people can have big screen experiences. Tablets, I mentioned before, everyone has the mobile device. Tell us what you mean when you say a 360-degree experience with an application.
There's a subset of our customers that have really rich media content, and video being, one of the rich content types, but also audio, really high quality audio, 5-channel and 7-channel Dolby, for example. To create a 360 experience, what we mean is that you use the web for the things that the web is best at. You use mobile devices, and you can use those in various ways. You can create native mobile application experiences, or you can create PWAs, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And you can also push it to the TV. So the scenario that we like to see is that a user is able to consume the content in the environment that is suited to where they are. Obviously, you can't carry a TV with you on the subway. But when you're at home and you want to watch a rich media experience that has high quality 4K video and high quality engineered sound, the place to do that is not on your mobile phone. And it may not even be the best place to do it on your TV, on your desktop. You have, high quality screen, but you don't have high quality sound. So the best place to consume super high quality content is on your television. So when we talk about 360 and you're a creator that has the ability to create content that is best consumed on a TV, we plug that component, that delivery mechanism into our mix. The web in that scenario mostly used for marketing. It's probably the best place for marketing. Mobile to consume it on the fly. Mobile for signing up for, setting up credit card scenarios. But we actually want to sit down and consume the content and dig into the experience. TV is a good place to do it. Now, there's a whole bunch of issues doing that, not the least of which is that the TV development marketplace is even less understood than the mobile and web market. So.
Yeah, see, I mean, there's just so much to this conversation, which I appreciate you. And again, I'm fascinated with it because I'm sharing this information with as many people as we can right here on this platform. Because as a live stream broadcaster, as a person who actually has looked into and has a television license, and the ability to take content and aggregate it into one place, rich audio, rich video, and have this user experience, but not necessarily just stuck on, the small screen, to really have this big screen experience as well. So this kind of lean in and lean out sort of content approach that I've always had envisioned for Red TV specifically, and the Philanthropy Channel, another thing that I've been working on. And we've had this discussion. So this is why, again, I wanted to bring your expertise here so that people could kind of get a sense that there's a complexity to it, but it's approachable if you have the right people kind of not going down one vertical. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, about an Apple, for example, an Apple app, if you will, and another application, whether it's through Google Play, Android, these kinds of things. We feel like it's a very confusing subject if you're not an expert in it at all. So let's just jump around a little tiny bit then. Let's talk about this idea of applications. Let me just bring something up here, George. I dug something up. I was looking on, here we go, apps in 2021. Here we go. This is from Statistica. I think you'll love this. Just look at the number here. The number of apps, George. Google Play 3.1 million. And Apple 2.1, and then Windows and Amazon there as well. This is as of the last, from stats that I found, basically this is the last quarter of 2020, 2020. Yeah, the last quarter of 2020. So basically we're looking at 5 and change, maybe what, almost 6 million am I looking at there? Apps, basically. So when people say there's an app for everything, it's not too hard to believe that there's something out there. If you have an idea, there's something out there like that. So the idea of Google Play being more Android, of course, Apple being from the iOS system and so on. But you have you guys use different things. I know you use Amazon Web Services. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. But as you can see how many apps are out there, 6 million apps. Let me just ask you, generally speaking, I mean, it really does depend on the application and so on. But if I was to come to you and talk to you about an idea for an app, what are some of the key things? What are some of the key things to creating a good app in your mind right now? The idea of, not so much the idea itself, but the application itself. What are some of the keys in your mind that come top of mind when someone's approaching you for that?
So I think the key thing in the creative arena is having the capacity and the willingness to create content on an ongoing basis. So creating content, a couple times a month is not going to cut it. You need to be creating content daily. Ideally, you have a team that's helping you create content, because the worst thing about if you have an app, you put it up on any of the stores, and people use it and they come back to it and it doesn't look any different than the last time we were there, they're gone. You've lost them. So it's really key to be pushing content up and doing it on a super regular basis. A corollary to that, and it's just as important, is getting the right level of quality. So there's not a requirement to create super high production value video, for example, but your data rates need to be good, your audio needs to be good, your lighting needs to be good. These are things that aren't really all that difficult to do, and aren't expensive to do, but some people just they miss that. And you go into it, and there's now a level of expectation for content across the board that it's at a level that you need to know about lighting. You can go in, do some basic 3-point lighting. It's all you need to do, right? But you can't do nothing. Right. You can't just shoot. I shouldn't say you can't do nothing. Shooting with available light is the right solution in some scenarios. But you need to spend some time on the audio, right? You need to spend some time actually creating an experience that includes all the components. The app needs to be well written. The content needs to be created at a high enough level. The hosting needs to be good. So you're not really undermining the experience by cutting corners on third tier hosting. When you can go to AWS and host unbelievably inexpensively and efficiently.
Yeah, that well, as a content creator, I appreciate the fact that you emphasize content as a must, and not just creating content, like you said, sporadically and here and there and so on. It's literally about this refreshing of content and keeping people interested in what you're doing, no matter what the platform is, by the way, whether it's a television show or a radio show, a podcast, a YouTube show. It doesn't matter what it is. And in this case, what we're talking about as an app, I can see how the functionality of an app, if it's just really just very transactional, can stay the same. But if it has anything to do with education, entertainment, these kinds of things, like you said, this regular mix of new content is so important. I just want to acknowledge a couple of people that are here. Rashmi, thank you for tuning in. We super appreciate that. I love that. There's the answer right there. Acknowledging love, keeping me alive in your red TV. Hey, listen, I super appreciate that. This is a lovely young lady from Ottawa. We're going to be talking to her sometime in the future, George. So I just wanted to throw that out there right there. But I love this. Thanks, Terry, for this comment. 𝘂𝗶𝘁𝗵 is a coach. He's an executive coach. He has his own company, 𝘂𝗶𝘁, and he's out of Ottawa. And this podcast makes complex concepts more accessible. Great conversation. So thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. And maybe I'm hoping this will help you a little bit as well, because I'm going to be talking about that in a second here. When it comes to content creators, and Terry is a content creator because he has his own programs, executive coaching programs and these kinds of things, which leads to having that kind of content online, which makes a lot of sense. So appreciate that, Terry. It's super cool. And who else we got here? Oh, Rhonda, always good to see you. Thank you for supporting being here on the show as well. So George, just wanted to let you know, it just wasn't you and I, but I'd be cool with that too. Just so you know, just with you and I, it's all cool.
I'm used to talking to myself, Peter, so this is all good.
You're just having me is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I get it completely. Well, let's talk about that. You made a great segue into this idea, and again, I want to take the complexity out of it. Very similar to what Terry just hinted at there. Your company uses Amazon Web Services. Okay, this is a big subject matter. So again, if you can simplify this idea of where when we think of apps, we think I have to develop an app or I want to develop an app. Is it going to be Apple? Is it going to be Android? And in this particular case, you're talking about the idea that you can have an independent app that doesn't have to sit on either one of those, but can be serviced with the flexibility of something as amazing as Amazon Web Services. So with that all being said, can you simplify that a little bit for us?
So the legacy way to develop mobile apps is to do what's called native development. Native development would use a programming tool called Swift for iOS, for Apple devices. And then Android, there's a whole bunch of tools that you can use to develop an Android app. We use Kotlin, but it's basically Java development for Android. When you're creating it, those are two separate development exercises, one for iOS and one for Android. And you're developing and you're building to host on the respective stores. So the Google Play Store for Android apps and the Apple Store for Apple apps. That kind of works, but there's some really big pitfalls there. It's not as easy to get published on the Apple Store as people would think. You can come to an the Apple Store with an app that could be declined by Apple for any number of reasons. It could be the content. It could be the way you've developed the app. It could be that they don't think it's app-like enough, that what you've created as an app, they think could actually be as well or better delivered on the web. So they retain, in the case of Apple and less so for Google, they retain the ability to control who has apps on their store. And for an individual creating an application, from our perspective, you're putting the success or the failure of your business to a larger degree than is necessary in the hands of Apple and Google. There's an alternative approach to doing that, and it's called progressive web apps. Progressive web apps don't actually live in the Apple or the Google stores. You don't have to publish them on the stores. You don't have to give them a cut of your revenue, of subscription revenue, to have them on the stores. You actually are effectively self-publishing them. So the key to that, and the reason people want to have an Android or an iOS app is that it's on their phone. It's on their mobile device. Right. With a PWA, you actually get the benefits of being able to download. So have an icon for your application running on your iOS or your Android phone, and you bypass the Apple and Google ecosystems entirely.
Right. Okay, so PWA, sorry.
Is a progressive web app. Progressive web application. Yeah.
Okay, so PWA, progressive web app that sits on your phone, any device, whether it's an Android sort of operating service or an Apple like an iPhone, iOS service. It can sit like an app, just like anyone that looks normal from what you download from one of those stores, but it's independent of being through those infrastructures.
So most people, when they're using a PWA or a native app, they wouldn't know whether they're what they're using. For example, Twitter is a PWA. Pinterest and Starbucks are PWAs. So there's a lot of major, corporations that have gone down the PWA route. It allows them to completely control the distribution of the application, which in a lot of cases is pretty critical. But it also allows you, so I mentioned that you develop in two different programming environments, for Android and for iOS. You can actually develop a PWA and you use a single code base for both of your delivery environments, for both Android and iOS. It's not inconsequential on the build side. You've got to build these two separate code bases, but then you have to maintain them. You have to support them. And then you have a third code base, which is typically your website. Well, PWA also runs on a website. So you build it once for delivery in all three locations. saving an enormous amount of money up front and a lot of money on an ongoing basis in terms of the maintenance and the management of the applications as well.
Oh, so okay. So again, you have to talk to me like I'm 5 because normally that's my brain. I just want to make sure I heard you. Is the ability to have all of the robustness, if you will, all of the bells and whistles and features, the fact that you can sit your coded app, your product, if you will, the app itself can sit on Amazon Web Services to gives you all of that, everything, all things internet, everything that you need to do in order to let it operate as an app. But you're bypassing the idea that you're going through Apple, iOS, for example, development, or Android development, which stand alone, and you can create one code that sits on the Amazon services, then sits on your phone separately. Did I get that?
Yeah, so that we use Amazon Web Services is important, I think, to our customers because we're so familiar with it. We've been using it for a dozen years or so, so we know how to leverage it and what services and tools work really well. But you could host your PWA anywhere. You could go to Azure, host it in Microsoft land. You could go to the Google Cloud and host it there, or you could host it on any service provider, any hosting service provider out there. We think that Amazon Web Services has, especially for media people, has the best suite of tools for both creation, for encoding video and audio, the best analytics over and above what Google Analytics have. You can run your Google Analytics layer, then you can run a whole other layer of analytics. All the tools that are being used by the major broadcasters are available inside of in the AWS environment, that whole ecosystem. So it's really great in a media world, and we've done a lot of media style applications. That's why we use AWS. Now, if you look at some of the other environments, Google, for example, their AI is probably a little better. IBM has really great AI. AWS has good AI, but probably not the best. So you got to pick the right hosting environment for the tool, for the application, and for the audience as well.
Wow. You know what? I'm following all of this. I can't believe it.
Let me give you an example of why you use AWS. So say you're hosting, your application has a ton of video, right? And you decided to use YouTube, which we would like to talk you out of if that's the decision you make. But anyway, but you're running an AWS.
Out of YouTube. I mean, this is why, everybody. This is why George is talking me out of YouTube. Go. Let's go.
So AWS can be really extremely cost effective. You can have a runaway hit video-based application, and depending on how you configure it and how long your segments are, if you're running, short to medium form video segments and you have 10,000 users, you're hosting at the highest level that's available in the marketplace will cost you a few $1,000s a year. So it's not free.
Right.
It costs you. That quality and that control costs you. But here's something you can do in AWS you can't do in a lot of other environments. So a content delivery network is something that was it was a corporate construct even just a half a dozen years ago. What a content delivery network does is it will allow me to monitor who is using my application, who's watching my video. And I could see in real time, it's like, oh, wow, there's a ton of people on the East Coast, maybe located around San Diego, West Coast, maybe located around San Diego, and there's a lot of uses going on there. And dynamically, I can say, you know what, I've got my app mainly hosted in a node in, somewhere around Chicago. I can replicate and move my content closer to my users so that there's no latency, there's no lag in the network. So the user experience is that much better. So you can do that in North America. You can also do it and say, wow, I've shifted now. The time frame is now I've got a lot of Asian users. You can have your content hosted on a node, on an AWS node in Tokyo, for example, to hit the Asian users. So that's the kind of, when you're creating these really, really, really engaging user experiences, you don't want your network and your hosting environment to let you down. And AWS allows you that fine, super granular control of every aspect of the experience, from the encoding to the backups, to the analytics, to the content delivery networks.
Wow. You know, and then you just described to me the experience that I'm certain that obviously people like Netflix wants everyone to have. You don't want latency. You want to make sure that you're being able to have analytics that suggest where where the big pipe needs to be, if you will, if that's a simplistic way of looking at it. Time zones, how things are fluid, if you will, when it comes to how the content is actually moving back and forth. And it is important that we talk about video because let's face it, we're creating one right now. I mean, this is a live stream, and then it will sit somewhere in a hosting service on a platform somewhere where people can watch it again, hopefully, and that's the whole sort of purpose of some of this conversation, which is I think a lot of people are creating content for their business, or they have content that they want to create, and they do want it to have in people's hands as an application, but not sure of why they would choose one of those operating systems over the other, or if someone comes to them and says, we use AWS, and here's why. This is why I really needed to hear an example of that so that people can kind of understand that there are options that are outside these two generally monopolies, duopolies, if you will.
Yeah, I think, if you look at AWS is quite complicated to use. It's not for the uninitiated. It's kind of a preferred developer environment. That's not to say you can't get great video. You can go to Vimeo and get great hosted video content, but you don't have the control. If you don't need the control, then probably maybe Vimeo is okay. But typically, video is just one component. You've got a whole experience wrapped around it. You can't do any of that in Vimeo. You can't do any of that in YouTube. So when you're thinking about it holistically, what's my entire user experience? You want to be able to make sure that all the components, all the pieces fit very, very tightly together, and that there's no degradation of the experience because one of the components, which is hosted by provider A or provider B, falls apart and disconnects. And by doing it, we do it all in AWS, so we control every element of the experience.
Oh, yeah, this is fascinating stuff. I hope people are getting something from this, because this is what I wanted to dig into, because I don't normally go into really technical sort of conversations, generally speaking, just because, again, first, I'm not the expert of it, that's for sure. And when I have somebody to talk about it, it can be overwhelming. I just want to, but I just think it's so important right now. I think over the last year, with everyone had this shifting up their business and changing their business, everyone's zoomed to death. Everyone's, the idea of being online and latency and all these things are so important if you have content and so on. Anyway, this is absolutely fantastic. I just want to throw up a couple of comments here. Create some magic for the user. 360 digital experience is part of science. Absolutely. I mean, we want this kind of experience. There's no doubt about it. Rhonda, appreciate that. I had, like she said, fascinating. I have no clue about app creation. Get in line, Rhonda, get in line. I mean, I've created some little dummy apps myself, George, but I mean, literally they're probably kindergarten to what what we're talking about with you. So this is good. George, do you teach how to create your own app? I'm gonna guess no is the answer to that, Rhonda, but no, I mean, we're talking about a complexity now that's a little different than just creating your own, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are sites out there that allow you to do that.
So to answer Rhonda's question,
yes. Please.
In kind of a roundabout way, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, people that really have a knowledge about some specific topic and want to create an app and take it out to an audience. And on a routine basis, we kind of work with them to refine their idea, to help them build a business plan, to help them figure out the best way to monetize the app and the best way to build the app. So, we've got a couple on the go right now that kind of clients that kind of are of that character. So it's not really, we don't really teach how to build the app, but we help them understand what the best, what the pitfalls are in developing it in an incorrect way, and what the best way to do it is based on where they want to take the app, where they want to take their business.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you know what? Rhonda actually is moving into creating video content of her own. She's actually started doing some live streaming. There's an example of that. And, health and wellness, mind, health and wellness, these kinds of things. Tremendous subject matter these days and moving forward, just because it's going to be top of mind for most businesses today and most people today since the pandemic has hit. So, there's an example right there, though, of a content creator that down the road might be looking for exactly that. Maybe looking for, here's something I thought was really cool. It was significant, huge savings in the PWA. So I love that. Someone picked up on that, which is fantastic. So I appreciate that. I'm just looking to see if there's any other particular. Here's a good. Let's just ask this question, George, because I know you said to me, I'm going to keep Peter away from YouTube if I can. But so, what is the disadvantage of using YouTube, of delivering the way that we're talking about right now? It's not to say YouTube is not an answer. It is an answer. But what are some of the disadvantages over what you're referring to with using Amazon Web Services and having more control? What is it?
So I think the key thing is that if you can embed a YouTube video on your own site, and without making a couple of simple code changes, then you get that list of suggested videos, recommended videos, which is horrible. It's taking a person off. You can actually short circuit that, but it always comes back to you can only show the videos on your website. That may not be, and in a lot of cases, isn't what you want to do. You want people to watch a video and then the video ends and they're engaging with the rest of your site. So that's one of the huge disadvantages. The second disadvantage is that while their encoding is okay for kind of mainstream, it's lowest common denominator encoding. For example, if you've gone to the trouble of doing some custom sound engineering for your application, and it's subtle in nature. When you put it up, when you push it up and do the encoding, you don't have the ability to tweak it. You don't have the ability to say, I want 192 kilobits per second here, but here I want to go to 320. You don't have that fine, super granular control over the audio experience. Do all apps need that? Absolutely not. If you're lowest common denominator for public consumption, you don't need it. But a creator could absolutely see why they'd want to have the control over those elements of the experience, and YouTube just doesn't allow you to do that. So.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, YouTube makes money from its ability to advertise, and if your video starts doing whatever it wants to do, it literally, you're not sure what sort of sometimes commercials or advertisements will go in front of it or in between it or something to that effect. So again, back to that control issue, and even the things that are around it being offered to you. With YouTube, I always find it fascinating for me, because I'm super interested in a lot of different subject matters. So literally I could be watching one subject matter and multiple different other sort of ideas are popping up around. So you should watch.
Off you go.
Yeah. Next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole. And you're like, I wasn't getting into basket weaving this afternoon, but apparently, here I am.
One of the key advantages to YouTube, though, is its ubiquity, obviously, which is also a disadvantage. Everything is on YouTube, and if you can search for it in an effective way, you can find all kinds of things, but you can also get lost on YouTube.
Yes.
So you can create the most amazing content and no one will ever be able to find you. But it's the second largest search engine in the world. I don't think most people realize that. Right after Google, YouTube is actually a large search engine. People searching for content. YouTube does great analytics, so not completely dissing it. They do great analytics, but there's no analytics happening on YouTube that you could do in Google Analytics, and then up the game even further by using the analytics in AWS. So.
AWS makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And Rhonda just says it's a way to own your own content too. And you're absolutely right. Once you start going to these other platforms, a lot of the control gets lost in the ownership part of it. Kind of like Facebook. I think people don't realize that Facebook pretty much owns your content. They can use it pretty much any way they want.
And Apple does, to a lesser extent, Google does it as well. They'll shut you down for who knows whatever reason. An example, we built an application last year for an oil and gas client that was in a northern community that they were in a 30-year relationship with to do heavy oil exploration. The oil company and the community and the elders and the tribe, they had a major disconnect And we bridged that disconnect by creating a television app and a mobile app to tell them all about, the oil exploration process, the reclamation process. Went to huge lengths to do environmental studies up front and detailing and outlining those environmental studies, monitoring stations for wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. So we built this amazing television app, and Apple took the television app, no problem. We then took exactly the same content and turned it into an iOS app, and they declined it. They wouldn't publish it on the Apple Store. Now, we don't know why. It was a great app. It was fully functional. We suspect, but could never prove, that the vetting process is done by humans. And we imagine that there's somebody that didn't really like to be promoting heavy oil development and declined the app. And we went through the process of trying to get that situation reversed, and we failed. So you put it, that oil company had invested a significant amount of money. They got the TV app, we got the Android app up, but we couldn't get it into the Apple Store. So.
Wow. See, and again, so many questions that just open up with that right there. Here, I just want to and so I appreciate you commenting on that. And this is from Suzanne Heaton, good friend of mine who supports Red TV. So appreciate that. She said, "Thanks for answering the YouTube question. It's not recognizing me on LinkedIn." So thank you, Suzanne. Appreciate that. And she's a content creator herself, and she has her own online program as well, her online training program and a course, if you will. So again, I'm going to jump to that in a second. I think you answered a lot of this, but I'll just ask you to summarize it for me one more time, just to make sure I heard you correctly. The app itself, why an app for having your own, again, app for as a content creator, audio and video? Why do you think it's important to kind of have your own app versus, the YouTubes and, SoundCloud or wherever you want to host your content? Why do you think it's important to have an individual one if you're a creator?
So I think that you can dramatically improve the outcomes for your users, and you can differentiate yourself from all the stuff that's already out there. So you would be able to do things that other people wouldn't be able to do using Vimeo and YouTube with your video application. You can do custom sizes. You can do call outs in the video, for example.
Right.
You can do things inside of your video stream that you wouldn't be able to do on other mainstream platforms, if that's an appropriate thing for you to do. But fundamentally, it's about control. So people look at the streaming platforms, from Netflix to YouTube, and they think this is it. This is all we'll do. This is what Apple TV does. This is what Android TV does. It just streams video. It starts, it stops. There's ads. There's pre, mid, and post roll ads, and that's about it. An app can do so much more. And video within an app can do so much more. It's a full, in the case of Apple TV or Android TV, for example, it's a full application development environment that you can do anything you can do on the web, you can do on your streaming platform running off your Apple TV platform. And a few people around the world, I know we've talked about this in the past, one of the really great examples is the Berlin Philharmonic. They have an absolutely amazing TV application experience, which eclipses anything that you see on Netflix or anywhere else. It's fully immersive, fully user controllable. It's just something. It's equivalent to a bum in a seat in the conference hall in Berlin. Totally controlled by the user with a remote control. And people just don't realize it. They think, oh, the revolution in video is streaming. That's barely scratched the surface of what you can do with video.
Yeah, and like everything you just described there, for example, to have that immersive experience of feeling like you're in a concert hall, you're not getting that through YouTube or a Vimeo. And I don't mean any disrespect, but it's a different animal we're talking about right there. So, but when it comes to creators, we just talked about that. I think there's a lot of people here, and I just mentioned almost every business person that I know these days, either has some sort of content that needs to sit somewhere. So especially when it comes to online courses, maybe training programs where people sign up and they're doing, some sort of an online, again, training course that they're delivering. Sometimes they do it through Zoom and other platforms such as that are live. I'm wondering what your thoughts are after talking to somebody about, or talking to that person right now, maybe talking to a person who has a training program or an online course. Why do you think it's important for them to kind of think about going down the having their own app as a solution for that?
So I think that you have monetization opportunities at various points along the user engagement path, and asking at the wrong time is a real turnoff for users. Seeing anything even remotely looking like a sell or advertising in the video stream is a big turnoff for users, and there's a ton of research out there that shows that. So if you're controlling the video yourself and it's in the context of an overall user experience, your application, your web and your mobile environments, you can make sure that when you're focusing, when you want the user to focus on what it is that you do that differentiates you from everybody else in the marketplace, it's a pure experience. So you can focus all your energy on creating the best content and the best user experience. Do the selling elsewhere. Do the marketing on YouTube. Do the marketing on social media. But when they come to your application environment, they're going to get something which is different than all the stuff they get elsewhere on the web and on mobile, which tends to be noisy and not terribly fulfilling. So.
Yeah. Oh, see, you know what, George? I'm going to tell you, I just had a little aha moment there. I really did. And you hit it on the head. Do all your selling elsewhere. Use all the social media sites to do, your teaser videos, maybe your audio, blogging, whatever you're doing, even paid advertising if that's the case. But once they come to your channel, if you will, your app, that engagement, that experience should be really, really very, very specific and very, very focused. It's almost kind of watching a television network, and this is very loosely said, but something like a PBS where there's not inundated with so many commercials and so on. You're just kind of watching and you're engaged with it, as opposed to just feeling like every 3 or 4 minutes you're bombarded with something. So that's a really clear distinction for me. I just heard it for the first time, which is that safe space.
PBS is a good example. They save their marathons. They do their money raising in big chunks, and when you come to the station, that's what you're getting. Otherwise, it's completely free of that kind of noise. So.
Yeah, I love, like you said, noise. And you're right. When it's inside of your content specifically on a regular basis, people kind of go, "Hey, am I engaging with the content, or are you just trying to sell me here?" And it confuses the process. That's fantastic. Let's talk about costs. And I'm not going to nail down anything specific here, but I've done a lot of research on this over a long period of time, but most recently because I knew I was going to be talking to you, and it still runs somewhere. I mean, of course, you can get someone that says it starts at 5,000. It just, listen, everybody, it doesn't start at 5,000. Okay. But generally speaking, the numbers that I can consistently see, George, and again, this is just a very, very ballpark, which still might sound like a lot to somebody. So I want you to address this, somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 at times. So if let's just say that it was in that ballpark, can you talk to the person who says, gosh, you're asking me to invest, if you will, $100,000 or $200,000 into a platform that I want to sell when I can put it up on YouTube or whatever the case may be. If you can, try to address what that sticker shock might be for some people, and why maybe it's actually still a deal at the prices that we're talking about here, or the costs that we're talking about.
So I think first off, it's an incremental spend. So you're not spending all that money all at once. Typically how we counsel our customers, you need to go in at least 3 stages. You need to create a POC, a proof of concept. So what is it you're trying to do? What is it that you're trying to do that maybe is a little bit different? And that could be in the case of a training program. So you wanted to run specialized analytics. And some of the people in the training world will understand what I'm talking about. There's tools called 𝘂𝗶𝘁𝗵, the experience engine. You could start to put up content and be tracking at a super granular level as people are watching the video and using a remote control or their mouse. You could be tracking what they're doing and how they're doing. An example might be, you're going to track, they went through a video and there was a test at the end of it. They scrubbed through the video. They didn't pay any attention to it. The audio level was down. They took the test and they failed. They went back, they watched the video again, they watched it. So you can do all that kind of granular tracking. Okay?
Wow.
So you might want to do a proof of concept. to take a piece of your video and actually start analyzing the user path through that content in a different way than anybody else has done. When you do a proof of concept, you don't commit yourself to doing that or turning that into the way you do things. After that, you might say, okay, now let's create a minimum viable product, which would be the tools and the features that you want to put in front of users, and put that in front of a subset of your existing customer base, for example, and test it to see how it's working. Test using focus groups, what the pain point is from a cost perspective. So you kind of do all these things in an incremental way, so you get a really good sense of what it is that you're looking to do, how you're going to monetize it, and then you build a budget and a strategy that would say, okay, over the next 2 years, I'm going to build these functional elements incrementally, add to it. As I add these things, I start to get revenue. So you build a whole business case first, and then you build a business plan, and you execute according to your business plan. So it's not just going out and spending a couple $100,000.
Right.
It's actually doing it with your eyes wide open. What kind of revenue you're going to get from that? How, when you've done this, you are now leaped ahead of your competitors if you're in the training space, for example, and how you're going to get the return on investment that you need to do that. But ultimately, you spend that kind of money, you have a channel, a 360 degree or minus the television component that is best of breed. It's the equivalent of what Starbucks would be doing. They might spend an order of magnitude more, just because they have to think about localization and doing it in multiple countries and whatnot. But you get actually the best of breed application, and you get effectively a streaming environment, if that's what you're doing, a network environment that just 10 years ago would have cost $2 million plus to do. And if you wanted to do it in the broadcast world, start at 10 million. So you're able to create these kinds of these streaming and these hosted and these environments that a person would not know. Disney couldn't do it any better. They have better content, they have a larger pool of content, but the actual tools and the applications that are being used to push the content and analyze and everything that's going on, you could have access to all that for the price points you were talking about.
Wow. See, and I think that's exciting for someone like me or anyone who wants to create, a network of content, to think that you could have something that would not only have the infrastructure of something like a Netflix, but well beyond that, like I said, the experience of, and you talk about AI and Netflix. I mean, they're tracking all the time. Like I can't tell you how many emails I get from these guys saying, "Hey, you're almost finished watching this," and I'm like, "How do you like?" I get emails saying, "Yeah, I see you just finished this show. Maybe you'll like this one." And I'm thinking, gosh, it's just a constant tracking of the analytics. But it makes sense that they would want to know that, because they want to know what their customer base is doing. So if I was an independent business person, again, had multiple courses, multiple training programs and so on, and really knew that I could give this experience globally. I think that's the other thing we don't talk about a lot. And we're not talking about a regional experience here. I mean, you're giving that experience to anyone globally, 365, 24/7 access, if you will. That's very powerful, which means, out of say 3.5 billion people online, you only have to find a few thousand. And
so I wouldn't want to leave people watching with the impression that it's got to be 150 grand. We have a client now that we're starting with. They have a full program that is change management program, and it's delivered in a traditional methodologies, face to face, right? And we're going at doing the conversion of that to online in a aPWA environment, so web and mobile, in stages. And the first stage was $30,000, taking some components of it. That every customer got kind of a standardized version of it, and we're creating that for out of the gate. And then we'll bring customers onto that first component, and then we'll add new components as we go. Along the way, they're already discovering, wow, I can think about my business in different ways, where I only had the capacity face to face to service X number of clients. I could serve in an online world, the way I'm thinking of developing this, I can serve X times 5. And the type of people that I have are different. My hiring is different, because the difficulty is finding really good change management experts to put face to face with people. Well, one good change management expert managing 5 clients where they could only manage 1 before, or whatever the number is, they can manage them more effectively in the online environment than they could face to face. So it creates different opportunities by moving in a really thoughtful way into a PWA online, web and mobile environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, the options are, it starts exploding with the ideas. So like I said, you can see it modularly as you build it as well. And so Rhonda just wants to say that, yeah, it makes business. Thanks for talking through the cost variables. And it's so true. I mean, I think, again, most people don't really understand that. George, I'm going to take a risk here at something here. When I say a risk, meaning I found this online. And it basically is, let me just see if I can find it here real quick. It's a piece of data that basically talks about the steps in business development. And I'm just going to throw up a couple here. Let me take off some of the graphics here so you can see everything. I'm wondering if some of this all sort of makes sense as well. So let me just read a couple to you. It steps in a typical application build, for example, outline requirements, the basic user interface, technical assessments and architecture, solidifying the design, front-end development, back-end development, testing, deploying, and then the scaling and so on. Does that all kind of start sounding semi-normal within the process you just talked about?
Well, that's the build, with variation. That's the build. There's a whole bunch of other things that need to happen in front of that. One of the key things you say, outline requirements. So create a detailed build plan for each feature in the app.
Yeah.
Sure, that's what the programmers do. But on the creative side of it, you do what we call user stories.
Right.
Who are the users? What is their path through this process? What does that look like? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to experience as they're going through it? What do you want them to do at the end? Then you pass that to the programmers, and they create a build plan for each feature of the app. So there's a bunch of pieces that are missing here. This is more of a, and there's the challenge that you have. There's a zillion great development shops out there that can write code amazingly fast and efficiently. And there's a whole bunch of design shops like agencies and whatnot that can, imagineer all kinds of great things. And there's this giant chasm in between them where getting those ideas into a form with the application developers that actually maintains the integrity of the original idea and the intent of creating the app. Developers aren't good at that. And creative people aren't good
at coding. They're making it. Yeah, they're just doing that part of it. They're not doing.
It's bridging the gap, and fundamentally, that's kind of what I do. I understand enough about what the developers do, and have been in the. And I'm not a coder, and I realized 20 years ago that I wasn't a coder, and started hiring coders. But I've worked in the creative realm in all different kind of different like advertising agencies and publishing and et cetera. So I understand the creative world, and I'm quite effective sometimes at actually bridging the gap between it and making sure the vision turns into reality, and doing that cost effectively. So
I think that's a great way for us to kind of summarize some of this conversation. This like I said, we were almost touching on this an hour now, and this is what I'm saying. There's so much to it. There's a complexity to it, but I wanted to try to have a conversation like this because first of all, it's top of mind for anybody who's a content creator or person who owns content. And again, gets back to the training and leadership, people who have those kinds of courses and programs, which are literally thousands and thousands of people on LinkedIn, that's for sure. You think of all businesses out there that have basically a requirement that they need to talk at a different level with their suppliers or their customers. And they think that the only way to do this is to go out and again hire somebody to make an Apple app or an Android app or maybe both, and all of those kinds of things. And so really, the purpose of what I was hoping we'd be talking about, which you did fantastically, is describe this idea that there is a solution. It can sit independent. It can sit independent where people can download it from your own website, put it on your phone, or your mobile device, if you will. iOS or Android, wouldn't matter. And then it has this robustness to it with Amazon Web Services where, again, like video, audio, rich kind of content can have a very unique experience for people, as opposed to it being hosted on these other platforms like a YouTube or Vimeo, or, and again, no dish to any of those solutions. It's just, it's a different experience. It's a different experience. And I'm glad you mentioned the costs. About, we don't want to scare people away with the idea that an individual a person like a solopreneur or a small entrepreneur cannot get into the game, because I want to make sure that they hear you loud and clear on that. It's very doable, and you guys would be the first one that would be able to kind of explain to them that process. Would that be fair to say?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I think that, we have a range of clients from, I'd say, kind of a, we start people off the $30,000-$40,000 range, kind of get them going. And that's actually building some level of functionality, but also helping them flesh out what the pathway is to the ultimate success of the application, where it's generating revenue that's sustainable business. But typically, kind of a range of development is between that and $300,000 at the top end. And 1 out of every 10 clients has that character. So.
Yeah, well, again, if we're talking about building like networks as well, by the way, I mean, if you want to compete, if you're in video and audio and you want to compete with the Netflix of the world, which you are competing with, by the way, for the eyeballs and so on, there's an investment part. I use the word cost, and I think I probably should use the word investment, because I think that's a better way of describing it, because it literally is the infrastructure to deliver content. And so it's the yin and yang thing. You need great content, of course, but you need a great delivery mechanism and a great experience for the customer as well. So you need both to work really well. So
you mentioned, Peter, in the world that we're talking about, if you were able to address a user base of 10,000 people on a subscription basis, creating content, even as a single content creator, you have a runaway business. Absolutely runaway.
You see, that's why I'm talking to you, George. I'm telling you, like, I'm thinking for myself. Listen, I'm being transparent with everybody out there. If people don't think that, I want Red TV to be a Red TV network, or the philanthropy channel to sit underneath this Red TV network idea, that is exactly where we're going to take this. And we have to, like you said, you don't have to go out and find 10, 20, 30 million people. You don't. You need a good base, solid base of people that understand what you're doing. They love what you're doing. And again, on a small subscription basis, a monthly or an annual sort of subscription, like you said, somewhere anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people doing that around the world. That's a big business. I mean, the math is simple for me. I know I always keep things simple, but you have 1,000 people paying you $10 a month. You have $120,000. Doesn't sound like a lot, but you know what? It is a lot in the sense of when you're trying to get something off the ground. So again, you take that number from 1,000 to 10,000. Now you got a significant piece of revenue, and you can start, using that in different ways that you've not thought of before, which is, whether it's more content creation and so on. I mean, that's what Netflix did they? And that's what Amazon has done with its Prime, is that you get into the aggregation business first, and then you make enough revenues, if you will, that you can start creating your own content. So
it goes back to the original question that you asked at the front of the show. What's the most important thing? It's the ability to create content on a regular basis at the appropriate production level, production values that are appropriate for your audience. And then that content can also be, in the case of training, it could be training content. It could be whatever kind of content, whatever you're putting in front of your target audience for consumption, you need to be doing it really, really regularly and pretty darn well. So. Yeah,
absolutely. It's one thing to be able to press, record, or play, or go live, but then you got to go live and actually do it. So that's another thing altogether, which I've learned the hard way, George. This is, I make it look easy, but hey, thanks, Tim. I appreciate this. Tim is another content creator himself. He's a live streamer, and I'm sure that he's getting some information or some background on this too, because if you're a content creator and wanting to expand on that idea, I think an application is probably the next step, and so on. So I appreciate that. Truly amazing topic. Consider wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Ron. I super appreciate that. I always appreciate when people are getting some value from this. And hey, if you got any questions about this, people moving forward, please reach out to George at nubix.ca. You can go that route, or of course here on LinkedIn. I have LinkedIn on the bottom there with George's a connection point right there for LinkedIn, his profile. And you can always reach out to me as well, because George and I will continue this conversation. And if you know people in that world, by the way, I think this is another thing about just watching this kind of content. If you know people in that world of content creation that are looking at another level of taking their content, please maybe keep this in mind and let us know, because we'd love to hear from you for sure. So George, before you go, hey, listen, we didn't even dig into you and your life. I mean, we like normally on this show, just so you know, I mean, I know you've seen a couple of the shows, like we go in all kinds of really cool directions. But I know today, I promise you, we were going to stay and just talk about apps. That's what we're going to talk about for sure. But I did ask you about your name, and then I got to ask you, then we got to have some fun. We're going to have some fun before you go. But I did ask you about your name. I said to him just before we went to air, everybody, I always ask people how to say their names. And I said, so George, is it Curnew or Curnew? Like, well, I instantly just guessed Curnew. So I said, just tell me what it is. And you said, George said, well, no one's ever even asked me that before. So I appreciate that, knowing that I was the first. I'll take that. But you gave me the answer. So it's Curnew. And then you told me a quick one-liner, and then we went to air, and I was like, that's a cool story. I need to know more. So tell me where that name comes from. Tell me the story. It's cool. So
family is actually Newfoundland. So there's a ton of Curnews in Newfoundland, right?
Hey.
So what happened is, so my grandmother is Icelandic, not too far from Newfoundland, so it's not unusual that she would be there. My grandfather, though, arrived on a boat from Lebanon, and never told anybody anything about why he left Lebanon, or he just arrived and married this Icelandic woman. And so interesting enough, when my hair isn't silver, it was very dark, right? And I have a sister who is like blonde and blue-eyed. So there's this crazy mix of Lebanese and Icelandic. So there's a whole bunch of Curnews in Newfoundland, and there was a kind of a migration to Vancouver as well. It must have been the water, I guess. Yeah. So there's a pretty sizable contingent of Curnews in BC and all over the coastal areas. Yeah.
I just love that story. We need, like, you're finding your roots. I don't know if you know that show on PBS. Love that show. Sounds like we need to know where the grandfather came from, Lebanon. He just showed up in Newfoundland. And Newfoundland at that time in the you were saying it's probably the turn of the century, maybe. You think about Newfoundland did not become part of Canada until 1949. So it was, it was independent. It was part of the Commonwealth. It was I guess directly connected to the UK. So it's just fascinating that he just showed up in Newfoundland, found someone from Iceland. I mean, come on. I mean, that's just a super cool story. Anyway, it's cool. And it's Curnew, everybody, just so you know, it's Curnew. There we go. We got that all straightened out. So George, before you go, got to have some fun. This is just the way we do it around here. We got to have some fun before we go. Now, we learned a little bit about your name, which is a good thing, which I think is fascinating. That's the story. I got to dig into that myself. I got to find about more Curnews over in Newfoundland. But we got to learn more about people. And so on this show, I think you might have seen this, but you're not getting away if you think we're not going to play a little bit of this or that with George Curnew. So I'm going to throw up a couple things. I'll throw up a couple of subjects, and you just pick one or the other. It'll give me a little insight inside the mind of George. So I hope this works for you. It works for me, just so you know. I hope this works for you. Let's start with this. So this or that, George, just pick one. And I don't know the question of this. I think beer is on the list there somewhere, but whiskey or wine?
Wine.
Wine. Red or white? I'm just curious. Red or white? Are you a red or white guy?
Oh, white.
White. Oh, white. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that. See, that's why I asked. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Good to know. Spider-Man or Batman?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Okay. That's okay. 60s music or 80s music?
80s music.
80s. Cool. Yeah. Well, my hair's stuck in 1987, so it's staying right there. Here's a tricky one. Not that tricky, but let's see. Apple or Android?
PWA, neither.
That's what I was thinking. I don't know if he's going to choose one. Okay, what kind of phone do you have? How about that?
I've been an Apple user since 1984, continuously.
Wow, you're kidding me. Wow, are you talking with when they first came out with the big colored bubbles and all that stuff, or even before that? Actually, the Mac was out in '84. It wasn't even colored yet, right? It wasn't those
Yeah,
bubbles.
it was just post Lisa actually. So the first Mac, so it was in the publishing world, and actually started using early desktop publishing tools, and the Mac, SEs and SE30s, little tiny little cubes and whatnot, for doing actually mainstream print publishing. So.
Wow, 1984. Not too many people I speak to can say that. That's for sure.
And
Okay,
it's been a love-hate relationship since then.
That's me. Love, hate, totally. This hair would be down to the ground if I didn't pull it out all the time from using all the Apple products, but that's another story. How about this? Chinese food or Italian food?
Italian.
That was a quick answer. Okay. Travel-wise, Europe or the Caribbean?
Well, that's a tough one because my wife is a scuba diving instructor, and I'm a big avid scuba diver. So it would be both. Ideally, one trip to each every year.
So you want to do somewhere, maybe I'm thinking maybe Nice for you want on the Mediterranean, so you can do some scuba, but it'll be in Europe. Something like that. We'll talk. Hey, this is a trick one for you, and this is a part of you that I know. Let's see. I'm really going to test you here now. The Porsche 356,
yep,
or Porsche 911 2.7 Carrera RS.
Oh, the 2.7 Carrera RS. I could buy 11 356s of ABs or Cs if I had one RS. So definitely the RS, 2.7 RS. It's kind of the iconic second generation 911. So I would pick that absolutely.
Okay, people, you just heard. Look, I didn't know what the answer is going to be. I didn't even know what I asked. I know their cars. I know their cars. George, I went and looked up what the top Porsches were for the last decade or so, or some sort of list. But just so everyone knows, George is, as you can see off the top of his head, he's a passionate Porsche, everything Porsche. This guy knows pretty much everything about Porsche. Where does that passion come from? I'm just curious. Where'd you pick that up from?
When I was 14 years old and reading Road and Track underneath the covers with the flashlight, I wanted to have my own automotive magazine. So I've been a passionate car guy since day one. And since the time I had my first Porsche, that's it. And it's like, there's nothing else for me. I've had other cars. I've had BMWs and, Acuras, all kinds of different cars, but I always come back to Porsche. So.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I know you mentioned how passionate you are about that. So I just thought I'd throw that in. You were so quick to answer too. So I know you know your stuff. That's for sure. I know that. How about this one? Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Sunset, evening guy. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Do you get up early in the morning anyway, though? Do you get up early?
I do. Yeah.
But you like the sunset. Okay, with a glass of white wine. I get it. It's all good. How about this one? Hope or freedom?
Oh, freedom, I think. There's no hope for mankind, so I'll take freedom.
I've not heard that ever said. Well, I've heard that said, but not on this show, just so you know. I've not heard it said like that. Yes, we better get the freedom anyway, because there's no... That's funny. Okay, I never heard it said like that before. Okay, finish this sentence for you. Finish this sentence, George. I love my life because...
I love my life because I love what I do. I've always loved what I do. The woman in my life and my kids completely fill every nook and cranny of my soul.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. Yeah, good family, health. You love what you do. Yeah. Life is good. Life is good like that. Hey, man, that's a fantastic answer. That's a fantastic answer. George, it's been a pleasure, my friend. We've tackled a very complicated subject, and you simplified it as best you could. So I really appreciate that. And our conversation will continue, and I'm sure that we'll have a reason to pop back and follow up. Hopefully, we'll get more questions about this in the future. Talking about personal apps and so on, and really wish you great luck with Nubix. You're doing some amazing cool stuff, and we continue talking about it. Hey, Red TV Network's got to go somewhere. So we got to figure all that out. So I super appreciate you sharing all your information with us, and I'm going to put it up again for our last time here on the bottom. Nubix.ca. Everybody, you can definitely check out George there, or you can also check out on LinkedIn right there. There's a LinkedIn profile that you can check out with George and send him a message. And if you got interest in learning more about apps, that's the guy right there over there. George, good to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Peter.
Good to see you.
This was fun.
Yeah, you enjoy. Hey, that's what we try to do. We try to bring some information, and then we try to have a little bit of fun. We had both here today, so
let's do a show on Porsche.
Listen, I don't even know how to spell Porsche, but you know what? Listen, that's a fun thing about you mentioned that. I love cars. I don't know enough about them, so I feel. But you know what? Maybe you can help me. You can educate me. I know they're super cool cars, that's for sure, and I appreciate them when I see them. I'll tell you that. Hey, you never know. That's actually a good idea. It will take me out of my comfort zone. I think maybe a Porsche show is the next thing to do. We'll have some fun with that. That sounds good. George, good to see you, my friend. And we'll do this again another time. And we'll follow up and we'll stay in touch because we have to do some stuff with Red TV. Simple as that.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. You out there watching right now, I super appreciate you being here. If you need to reach out to us, obviously, redtv.ca, you can do that. And as we end every show, I think what I'll do today, George, let me see where I'm going to take you today. I'll take you to Necker Island. How about that? I'll take you to Necker Island. I had a chance to go over and meet the guy who owns that. What's his name again?
Branson.
Yeah, I just kidding with you. Yeah, it was a great experience. So I'll take you out to Branson for a little bit, and stick around. We'll chat after a little bit, George. Everybody else, listen. Thank you for joining us, and be kind out there, everybody. Just be kind out there. See you next time. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.